This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to the tribe a leadership coach, consultant, motivational speaker, and author who has written thousands of articles for online media, including Inc.com, Fast Company, Huffington Post, and Psychology Today. She's also the author of the national best-selling book, The Leadership Gap. This is Lolly Daskal. The Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Lolly, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron movement. We are so happy to have you here with our tribe today.
Jim, I'm so privileged to be here.
Lolly, it's funny, when we were in the green room before we hit record, you had just told me you have done over 400 podcasts. That's insane.
I was launching a book, and it was very important to get the message out and to serve a group of people that would be interested in the message. So I put the nose to the grinder and said, let's get on as many podcasts as I can.
I love that. I love that sense of hustle, and nobody can say that you certainly didn't put the effort in. And even to this day, I know the book came out 2017-ish, somewhere in there. That you're still working hard today. Before we get into some of our conversation, Lolly, I think it's important for our listening audience we'll recognize, because I'm sure we'll refer to it. We're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the middle of May, and it's still affecting us. And Lolly, I know you live in New York City, and it's got to be a pretty difficult time for you even today.
It has been very, very, very challenging. It's not only challenging for me, but it's challenging for everybody that lives in New York City, those that are essential workers, who have gotten COVID. It's been a hard time. It's been a tough time.
Well, we all feel for you no matter where we are. Obviously this is a global thing and everybody's impacted one way or the other, but you were very close to the center of it all. And so we do appreciate and acknowledge the time that you've taken out for this. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me too.
So Lolly, one of the things that this audience is familiar with, and I'm sure they have heard you speak or have read your book for sure, because it's very close to our hearts too. Everybody has a leadership opinion. There's 5,000 leadership theories. Leadership has been practiced since the beginning of man. So kind of nothing's new. It's all about perspective, and it's all about how you tell the truth about it. And from our point of view at the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, it's about how others make other people stronger and better and make them think differently, because we do some critical thinking. We push each other's boundaries, all of that, because it's always about the human. And I believe that is definitely one of the ways that you think about the world of leadership too, is that it starts with the person in the mirror.
Absolutely. The thing is, when I started my business over 3 decades ago, I wasn't here to reinvent anything about leadership. But what was most important for me to discover what it takes to be a great leader. What are the fundamentals? What are the core messages? What does it mean to be a leader? And this is the thing, is that I believe that every single individual is a leader in their lives, in their businesses. You're a leader to someone. So that means, what does it mean to be a human? So when we talk about leadership, we're really talking about humanity. We're talking about who we are as a person. And the message can be translated into leadership message, and it can be translated into a human message. But at the core of everything that I believe, and it goes back to, because I studied history and I studied philosophy and I studied psychology, and at the core of everything is, who are we? Once we know ourselves, that is the only way we can lead others. That's the only way we can be a better human being.
I love that. And, it's kind of funny. People say there's no I in team, But there is a lot of me in there, right? Each team person, each team member has to be strong in themselves. They've got to have that confidence. They got to have that self-awareness, because even if you think you're a great leader and people always throw out, the team's no stronger than the weakest link. It could be you, but you've got yourself with so many blinders on, you don't even realize that it's you. And your point is all about self-awareness for sure.
Well, the leadership gap talks about that we have within us, which is my book that you mentioned earlier, is that we have within us a polarity of character. We have a part that wants to succeed, which is our greatness, but we also have a part within us that Jung calls the shadow, which I call the gap. There's a part to us that when we get stressed, when we're in tough times, when we are challenged, we go to our default, and our default is always our gap. And the problem is, it keeps us from being the human that we want to be, the great leader that we want to be. We don't do it intentionally, but because we get comfortable with it, of doing it over and over again, that becomes our comfort zone. But the truth is, that's the beginning of our discomfort. And if we don't get out of our gaps, you cannot bring the humanity to your leadership.
Is this caused? What's the trigger point that you find in most people? Like, if you say, okay, I'm kind of faking it till I make it. I'm projecting this type of personality or this type of trait, but the realities are, you kind of said, when a crisis moment hits or high stress hits, you start to go into the shadow, into the gap. What are the normal trigger points? What's an example of a normal trigger point for that?
We'll talk about a trigger point, but one thing I'm a big believer of, I don't believe anybody should fake it till they make it. I've written many articles and I've gotten lots of, pushback, because the thing is, this is what I believe. If we have this polarity of character, right? If we have this duality within us, and I'll give you an example, and that's how we'll talk about a trigger. So the first, my book is about 7 archetypes. There are 7 archetypes that live within us. The first one, I think everybody will resonate with, is the rebel. The rebel is an individual that wants to make a difference in the world. They want to make an impact in the world. In order to do that, Jimmy, they need to have confidence. They need to have the gumption to say, I could do this. But we have a gap. And the gap is, we all suffer from the imposter syndrome. My research shows that 99% of individuals that want to be successful, that are entrepreneurs, that are leaders, they suffer from the imposter syndrome, which is, I don't think I could do this. I don't think I'm smart enough. They have self doubt. When you have self doubt, that's the gap. When you have self doubt, what happens is it costs you to be the rebel. It costs you in your confidence. So the trigger is you. The trigger is, I don't think good enough. The trigger is within you. I don't think I'm smart enough. The trigger is within you, the mindset that you have. And so if you have that, you can't fake it till you make it. It doesn't work that way, because there'll be something else that will pop up, another gap that will cost you in your greatness and in your success. So I'm a big believer of, you have to own it. If you don't own it, it owns you. And so if you have self doubt, what are you going to do about it? The trigger is, I'm not smart enough. So are you going not to address it? Are you going to fake it till you make it? What does that mean? The truth is, if you want to be a great human being, if you want to be a great leader, then you have to take that self doubt and do something with it. So if I'm not smart enough, then what skill do I need to learn? If I'm not good enough, how do I give myself permission? We have to learn to address the gaps in order to embrace the greatness that lies within us.
It's just truth telling, isn't it? It's just
Yes.
telling the truth. So let me twist it then. This is an assumption, so check me on this. I assume, obviously, the most powerful presence is yourself. Like, if you are self-aware, like, okay, I am doubting myself. I'm not smart enough. I've got to do something about it. How about if it's flipped, and you, from a leadership or a peer perspective, or even a subordinate, see a gap in your leader, and you approach them, or in your peer, and go, hey, Lolly, you know what? I see a lot of self-doubt in you. How does that resonate to the person? Don't you find that most people get defensive and they ignore that or they deny it? Is it good for people to start to recognize other people's gaps, and should they articulate it, or should they just be self-aware of it, of other people's gaps?
Great question. Never call out a leader on their gaps. Number one
Mm.
rule. People get People don't. I know everybody talks about feedback. Give me feedback. I want feedback. It's not true. People don't want feedback. They don't find it to be a gift. They get defensive. They don't like it and they shut down. The way to get through to another individual, if you are having a problem with your leader, your boss, your spouse, your partner, you see something in them that doesn't work for you, the first thing I always tell my clients is, if they're triggering you, that means something about them isn't right with you. That means there's something within yourself that you're not liking, that you're not dealing with. And before you point a finger at someone else, you have to be honest, like you said, tell the truth about yourself. If you don't like something about your boss, let's just say, I'm making this up on the spot. Let's say you find that your boss is arrogant, right? And you're like, you just don't like it. There must be some arrogance within you. Otherwise, it wouldn't bother you. You'd be like, okay, he's arrogant, whatever, I'll deal with it. So we have to look within ourselves. We have to look in the mirror and say, number one is, what is it about me? Number two, if you want to have a better relationship with that individual that is triggering you, the best way to do it is to talk about self. Say, you know what? Sometimes I'm arrogant. And because I am, I don't think I connect well with others. What do you think happens when maybe you're arrogant? Open it up with an open ended question instead of pointing a finger. Talk about self. Use the I language first in order to talk to someone else about what's bothering you about them. I call these courageous conversations when I coach. It's like before you attack someone, use the I language instead of pointing a finger.
You said something that's a little controversial out in the workplace is feedback is not a good thing. Feedback doesn't work. What is your recommendations then? Is it, like how do leaders become vulnerable in front of their peers or the ones that they lead, them as, the team of subordinates below them? How are they supposed to have this if feedback is going to bring up a defensive? Is it really just being a vulnerable leader? How do you gain the trust? How do you gain the trust of the team around you if you really can't have this feedback?
So, Jim, I want to clarify. I'm not against feedback. I think feedback is a great thing. I'm just saying people don't see it as a gift and people don't like it. And I have to recognize that there's a
I
difference.
like that. Yep.
So, the thing about feedback, it has to exist. How you give the feedback is the difference, being defensive, not being defensive. That's the only difference. The thing is that people don't like it. Let's recognize it. No matter what they say, they do get defensive. Let's know that. How we do it, we have to change it.
What are some of the things that you think create levels of high trust then? So if you have people that are subconsciously walking around, with doubt, if they're aware or not of their gaps, if someone that has read your book and is looking through that lens of, okay, I know my gaps. Oh, I can see their gaps. How do you start to form these levels of trust? Is it just this continuation of what you were mentioning before about starting almost everything with I, this is I instead of you and all of that to open up that level of vulnerability? Or
So let's start, because that's a lot you're asking. To me, that's like six questions in one. So let's
oh
break that.
boy, okay.
Okay. Because there's a system to this, right? I'm a big processor, I'm a big systems person. And so we have to think about it this way. As a human being, we get triggered 1,000 times a day. What we do within those 1,000 times is the difference between being the leader you want to be and being the leader you're not. So the question is, should I use an I language? Should I look in the mirror? It all fluctuates. It matters about the moment. So let's take examples so it can be clear about what I'm saying. Let's say you have an important presentation to make and you have self-doubt. The question that I would say as a coach, what do you need in order to become stronger, more confident in that presentation? So then that process is about yourself. If you come to me and say, okay, at 3 o'clock, I had a meeting with my boss or I had a meeting with one of my colleagues and it never goes right. I just don't like it. I would say, what did you do in order to have a better conversation or a better meeting? Did you do anything or did you come in like a full storm and it didn't work? What do you need to do to be different? Because change starts from within before you can change someone else. And then what do you need to do in order to make it better next time? So that's why I said there's 6 questions in one. If you're
Yeah.
working on yourself, yes, talk about yourself. If you want to connect on your team level, if you want to connect with another human being, use an I language first before you poke at someone else.
No, I love that. And nobody said leadership is easy, and no one says following is easy. This is an active thing. This is actively going on all the time, and you have to be aware of it and all of that. Lali, I'd be interested to know, like, as you're identifying these gaps, and we're talking a lot about self awareness. I'd love to know your opinion about personality assessments. There's a ton of them out there, and there's 5 or 6 that probably almost everybody that's listening here has taken at one point in their lives or not. But what's your opinion on them, and are they a starting point to start to realize potentially what some of these gaps are? Or how do you get to that discovery process?
Also, a great question, Jim. Thank you for asking that because when I walk into an organization, people will be rattling off, I am ENTP and I'm a this and I'm a this, I'm a color, I'm a cow, I'm a dog. They're telling me all about their personality assessments. I as think about it this way. As a tool, it could be interesting, it could be helpful, but it's not the be all and the end all. When you said leadership isn't easy, no, because leadership is about life, and life isn't easy, but we want to do the best that we can do within the moments that we are given. And so if you're given these personality tests and your team is, the color block, I've studied them all. I've been certified in all of them. I can come into your organization, do any of them, but at the core, let's go to the core. At the core of who you are, it's not what you do, it's not what you say, it's not how you say it, it's not why you say it. What's important is who you are. That's my message. That's why it's called Lead from Within my company. I believe you're the inner driver. It has to start from the inside. COVID taught me something very interesting. It's so dangerous to be outside, right? So we are forced to go inward. And that's what it is when it feels unsafe outside, when it feels like it's not going right in the organization, on your team, with your colleague or your leader, go first within. Find out who you are. Get strong there. Embrace your greatness because otherwise, as I said earlier, your stress, your difficulty, your tough times will only lead you to that danger zone, which is the gap.
So, Lolly, let's stay on this for a second. So, we talked about how important the human is, and you're talking about, it starts from within. What are some of the core? So, you have a great background, not only of just dealing with humans almost every single day, right? That's a PhD in itself by being a coach for as long as you have coached successfully and at the level you have. But through your background in psychology, I know you study modern philosophy. You have a lot of science in your background also. What are some things from the human being, kind of that primal thing that you think is important to help create that level of self-awareness, to help have someone look inward when it's a lot of white noise going on in the world right now, especially now, with a lot of high stress going on? What are some things that truly work to make yourself look inward?
Again, another great question, Jim. First of all, yes, now there's a lot of stress. But before this even happened, in organizations, with talking to individuals, people were feeling stress before. people were feeling challenged before. It's not easy. We have to recognize that what if you are pursuing greatness, if you're pursuing to make an impact, it comes with challenges. Um, I'm a big follower of the hero's journey, right? And it talks about in the hero's journey, a person goes through their lives. They don't just arrive and say, okay, I've made it. Once they've arrived, they want to move on to the next level. And then when they've arrived, they want to move on to the next level. So life is always coming with challenges. We're always in a new phase of a tough time. And so it's not so much about what's happening outside, but inward, we're always challenging ourselves to take ourselves to the next level. So we're always going to be bumping into something. I always tell my clients if you're really going after something with a full vengeance, know there's going to be roadblocks. And the harder you try, the bigger the roadblocks. What you do in those challenges, what you do you step back or do you just leap forward, will be the difference. And so when we talk about the stress that's outside, there's always a stress. Again, the choice begins within us about what we're going to do in those moments. And if you're really pursuing greatness, you're bumping into a lot of stress and a lot of challenges.
My last boss in the military used to always say, pathfinders, trailblazers always have scars and scratches and bumps and bruises. And if you're on a journey in life, no matter where you are, to your point, everybody is on, from a primal point of view, everybody is on a constant journey. You're going to have the scratches and the bruises and the bumps. You just are. And you have to recognize it. And it's almost a good thing in a way. It makes you that much stronger.
Well, Viktor Frankl, who said that, we are going to be facing struggles. It's what we do with those scratches, those struggles, and if we can bring meaning to them, right? If we can make a purpose of them, we can really survive and absolutely thrive.
What are some things that you have found that make you stronger? Like is when you talk to yourself, your inner self, do you find meditation? Do you find exercise? Is there a connection in diet and nutrition? Those kind of things that allow you to hear your inner voice more clear.
So I have two rituals that I have been doing uh, a long time. The first ritual is that before I start my day, I make sure to say what I am grateful for. I say, I'm grateful for allowing me to get up. I am grateful it's another day. I'm grateful that I'm alive. Little things. It doesn't have to be life changing things. I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful for the love that I feel. Whatever it is, it's almost like a mantra. I go through the things that I am grateful. I find by being grateful, it energizes me and sets me on the right tone for whatever I'm going to be facing that day. Because if it's difficult, I can say a little mantra I am grateful. I can do this. The second ritual that I have before I go to sleep, I always review my day. And I say, what did I do today? Did I serve? Did I bring value? When I spoke to that person, were they better because of my presence? And I go through the day and then I ask myself a question every single night. What would it take to be better tomorrow? And by doing this ritual, I'm constantly taking myself to the next level. I'm constantly becoming better because I am taking stock of who I am. If we don't ask those open ended questions of ourselves, how are we going to keep tab of what we're even doing? So between the gratefulness, I find them as bookends between the gratefulness in the morning and asking myself how I can do better the next day. I find that I'm constantly growing, developing, and expanding.
I love that. And I think everybody appreciates you sharing that with us. And then also, I think those are just great reminders of what we should do ourselves. You kind of get into the thing of what do you do first thing in the morning? And there's the old saying about, making your bed is how important that actually is, right? It's not the act of making the bed, but it's the reason why and all that. And I think when you wake up with that purpose to be grateful, and using that as the start of your day is just a great way to get you centered, and it's a foundation. it's a foundation for sure. So Lolly, what would be the opposites then? What have you found through, the thousands of people that you interact with and coach and lead? What have you found to be toxic thoughts? What have you found to be toxic habits that are fairly common that really eat away at someone, that kind of destroys being the best that you could be?
Any individual that says, "Why me?"
Ha.
That's a toxic thought. I always say, "Why not you? If not you, then who?" And so the question, if you're asking yourself, "Why me?" then I always say, "Why not?" It's what you do within this challenge. It's what you do in this crisis. This is maybe your purpose. This is your next level. Don't miss this opportunity, because this could be maybe the thing that you were born to do. And so when
Yeah.
you don't like where you're at, instead of asking, "Why me?" ask, "Okay, if it's me, who do I need to be?"
I love that. I'm a big believer in the victim victor mindsets, right? The same problem can be faced with the one person, and can decide whether they're a victim of it or they can be victorious in their actions about it, and everybody has that choice every single time. Why not me? There's no doubt about that. It's interesting too when you say about in this current time about how it could reshape us. I think that's a great point, Lolly. We have a shared friend, Jared Nichols, who's a futurist, and I had just had a podcast interview with him last week, and it was a great conversation. And he was kind of talking about from a leadership perspective and a business perspective about can you shape the future or not. But the realities are this comes down to an individual thing too. One of the things that he said was control the narrative. Like if you start building the narrative of what your future could be, you are more than likely to be on the path towards that future. You can actually change things, because instead of being victimized and just whatever happens, happens, start building the narrative on what you think you're going to be in the future. What are your thoughts on that? Do you believe in that, building a narrative, using this time now to shape who you are and become even stronger as a human being?
Absolutely. I do it every night, right? But the question is, how can I do better tomorrow? Is controlling the narrative, right? It's saying,
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
no. So it's saying the same thing, but in a different way.
It is. It sure is. Good catch. That is what that's exactly right. So Lolly, you came out with the leadership gap in 2017. So it's been 3 years now. You've probably talked and given 1,000 speeches on the leadership gap. And everybody I'm sure that's read the book has approached you and asked you questions and questions and questions, really kind of tested your theory on the book. Looking back on it now, 3 years later, is there anything you would change in it? Is there something you feel you missed? Is there a part two kind of, of, hey, if I had it again, there'd be one more chapter about this? Or even in the context of the COVID pandemic, is there anything that's now upon reflection that you would want to put in there?
Again, great question, Jim. The system itself of the 7 archetypes are timeless, ageless, and it doesn't matter what it is happening outside. So would I change the archetype? No, because it's based on science and psychology, and it's based on 3 decades that I've been doing what I do. So in the system itself, I wouldn't change anything. The only thing is I would stress is that people think when they read the book is that I'm only one archetype or I'm only another archetype, but they're based on value,
Mm,
based on character. And this is the most important message to say about it. We are many things. We're made up. We're not just one thing. A couple of years ago when they were talking about branding, and I was attending an event and I was speaking about leadership, there was a brand expert. And he got up and he said, "You have to pick one thing, find your niche, and you can only do that one thing." And I
mm.
sighed very deeply. And I said, yes, you can pick one niche, but you are more than that niche. You can be more than that one thing. Think about it this way. When I go to a client, I can come in with a maybe I don't know, the board brings me in and says, "You have to coach my client." Does that mean I'm only going to coach this client? No, maybe I'll bring in a workshop. Maybe I'll bring in a lunch and learn. Maybe I'll bring in a master class. I could still bring all parts of myself. So this niche thing really threw me off. What I think is that people have to remember is that at any given moment, we have a choice of who we are going to be. And I want you to read the book, The Leadership Gap, because you can pick which archetype you need to be depending on the situation. So the long answer is that no, the thing that I would change is maybe stress a little bit because everybody says, which archetype am I? I go, you're all of them, all. Embrace them all. They're based on the values of what is character. So if you want to lead with character, embrace them all.
I love that. Again, right? Nothing's easy. Nothing is ever in black and white, and it's always evolving. It always is, and the situation changes all the time. I am a huge believer, Lolly, too, that leadership lessons are timeless as long as they are executed. And there are many leadership behaviors that have been practiced for over 2,000 years that are still as authentic today as they were then and can be practiced. And so, again, I think it's iron sharpens iron is one of the examples, right? This is a timeless practice of taking what you know and giving it to others and making others better and be critical of others and push them and make them think more and push boundaries and all of those. So, Lolly, if those are timeless lessons, and if it's just a matter of tweaking a little bit, how about looking forward, looking into the future, coming out of this crisis that we currently are in? What do you think for some of the folks that are probably just coming up in new leadership positions that are listening to the podcast? What do you think are some critical competencies that would be required for future leaders from leading on from 2020 and beyond? What are some of these competencies that may be new because of either technology or the way that we are in life right now, whether it's the business context or personal context? Some competencies that you think are emerging?
So again, great questions, Jim. I'm so happy that you're asking this. You see, the thing is,
Great.
before COVID hit, you know what my clients were worried about? AI, right?
Ha.
Before
Yep.
they were worried about something else. So for me, the message has always been the same. Doesn't matter if it's AI. It doesn't matter if it's COVID. It doesn't matter what next happens. We have to go back to being the humanity of who we are. We're always going to need, think about this, the emotional intelligence as a human has, because a robot can't have it, a virus can't have it. It's who we are in this virus. It's who we are in when you have artificial intelligence. It's who we are when you have other crises that really will matter. So the question goes back to the fundamentals. Who are you as a human being? Because the person that knows themselves and knows their strengths and know what they can bring and bring that emotional intelligence to a conversation and to a situation, those will be the leaders that will stand out. Those will be the human beings that will stand out. So don't become a victim of what's happening outside. Become the victor, as you talked about, within, so you tackle anything that is thrown at you.
Oh, Lolly, this is a great conversation because I just feel like saying amen, amen, because it is an interesting thing that many leaders get it and just as many don't get it about the power of the human, both themselves and the connection with others. An interesting story that I tell real quickly is like, I grew up in the military. I started off in special operations and small team dynamics, right? 6-person teams, very close, very interconnected. Grew up in team environments when I was a young boy, playing sports, football, those kind of things. And it always was the essence of kind of this human dynamic because it was a team thing. And as I grew up in leadership positions and at my very last military position, I was in charge of a very large organization, 110,000 people, and I was in the Pentagon, and it was very bureaucratic and all that stuff. But I practiced, Lolly. I practiced the same techniques as a leader of an enterprise as I did for a 6-person team, and it was based on human-centric principles. And if you stayed true to those things, guess what happened? You still could lead at those large enterprise levels, practicing very simple human centric leading techniques. And I just think it's timeless. I think it's timeless. I think that competency reminder that you bring it back to the fact of no matter what the latest shiny object or new theory is out there, or the thing that's going to help you, like big data and AI, the realities are you have to bring it back and make something of it. It's just the most important thing.
Now I'm saying amen, amen, amen.
All right. Hallelujah. I love it. I love it. And it's just an interesting conversation to have over and over again, because I think you can't say it enough that, in order to understand others, you have to understand yourself first. This level of self-awareness, how important it is, these gaps, and being ultra aware of them and having the courage to, and maybe let's talk about that. Let's talk about courage for a second. Like, so you identify these gaps. Let's say you have someone that's very self-aware. You talk about the self-doubt. How do you find courage in yourself? Is it just basically the genesis of this entire conversation? By having these things, by hearing others talk about it and knowing you're not alone, should that create the courage enough to work through these self-doubts? What do you use when you're coaching somebody and you've identified these gaps? How are you behind them, kind of pushing them forward, getting them to take that first step? How do they gain that courage?
So I'd like to detour for a second. I love your question, but I think something is very important that we should say before we talk about courage and within others and how that works. Doing this kind of work of being human takes courage. Doing this kind of
Hmm.
work, asking yourself, who do I need to be on a daily basis in order not to be in your gap, is a lot of work. And most individuals, they don't want to do that work because it's hard. They want the 5 steps, the 3 reasons, the 2 things you must do. That's why I read a book a day, and every single book that I pick up is the how you need to be, what you need to, why you need to do it. And I
Yep.
believe that this is what happens, Jim. I can give you, let's say if I have a client and I say to my client, if you do A, B, and C tomorrow, I know you're going to have the best return that you want. I know the results. I've seen it 1,000 times in over 3 decades. I know the formula. But if that individual doesn't have the courage to know who they are and they're suffering from a bunch of gaps, they can't do the A, B, C, D to be successful. So before you can lead, before you can make an impact, you have to be courageous enough to say, you know what? I don't know myself that well. I don't know my strengths, and maybe I'm just leading from my gaps. So you have to make that decision to do the work. And doing the work is not easy. But if you do the work, it makes everything else easier. That's the math equation. People think, I don't want to waste my time going inward because I can't do what I need to do outward. Well, you're not going to be great outward if you don't go inward. And people just don't like that message. They just want the quick fix. I don't have quick fixes. I can give it to you, but trust me, you won't get the results you want. So that's number one. I thought I would take that detour because I think it's important to say that out loud because I,
Amen.
I say it all the time. So let's talk about courage. What is courage? Courage is the language of the heart. COR means core, means heart. It means tapping into who you are meant to be, the boldness and the determination that it takes. But the thing is that not many people are courageous. They rather, in my book, I talk about courage as someone who's a hero. If you are courageous, you're a hero. That's the archetype. But the thing is, there is a gap here, and the gap is the bystander. When we get challenged, when we feel stressed, most likely People will be bystanders. Even if they see something, even if they hear something, they won't say anything. Why? Because they don't want it to be affected. They don't want to be the one that said something and now people don't like them. People always want to be liked. People always want to be loved. And so they're driven to maybe be the bystander. But the gap is, a bystander is a coward, because our heart has a language, and our heart wants us to be courageous. And if you're not expressing the heart language, if you're not saying what you need to say, you're not going to be able to be the person you're meant to be. And so we need to be courageous. We need to be the hero of our own lives in order to recognize heroes that are outside of ourselves. And only when you see the hero within can you then recognize it in others. And that takes courage.
I love that. And as you're talking, I'm imagining how many people are paralyzed in life. How many people are just afraid to even accept what they are hearing you say right now, Lolly? How they just don't want to hear it because it's a sense of denial about how that even courage is hard. And most people, you don't say they're lazy, but maybe they're disconnected from understanding that you do have to have these levels of effort. And I think it's an interesting thing because humans have that fight, flight, or freeze response, right? That very primal fight, flight, or freeze. And I think many people, especially in these crisis moments, are probably in the freeze mode or probably fighting or flighting, and just being in complete denial about these things. Is it important to have these hard conversations with people to, one, recognize the fact that they may be in a frozen kind of posture and to try to break them out of their shells?
There's a good thing about what I've been doing and a bad thing about what I've been doing. Because I have so much experience, I've acquired a lot of knowledge. And with that, I have seen what happens to an individual when they don't address the language of their heart. Usually, dis-ease happens. Dis-ease. Within themselves, they don't feel good about themselves. And dis-ease can be an illness, it could be a catastrophe, a trauma, a divorce, something. People call them, nervous breakdowns. People call them, somebody turns 50 and all of a sudden they leave everything, they change everything. The thing about it is, we are brought onto this world to find our purpose, to listen to the language of our heart, to listen to that core. If we're not doing it, life's going to poke at us any way it can. Disease, trauma, virus, whatever it is, people are really looking at themselves now the way they haven't looked at themselves before. We were forced to do it because there was a dis-ease. If you don't want a dis-ease, you don't want an illness, start now. Do the work now. You don't need to wait until life pokes at you. You can start the awareness within yourself. So the more work you do on yourself, the more ease you have within yourself, and you don't have to freeze and you don't have to flight. Something happens, you can say, let me look at this, see where it's coming from, why it's happening, and then do something about it.
Wow. Lolly, that's huge. Let's take the dis-ease and work hard on bringing in the ease. And I think that's a great point for us to end today. And I'd love to give you a last word for inspiration for this audience, because I guarantee you this: I've got 3 pages of notes from our conversation, and I think everybody who's listened does too. We'd love to give you the last word, but what a great way to start getting our mindset towards where we need to be better tomorrow.
So the thing that I would like to leave people with is that when I talk about greatness, it can be translated into success. It can be translated into getting what you want. It can be translated into getting to be who you want to be. Most people think, you know what, it's for them. Someone else can have it. They have what it takes. And this is the last words that I'd like to say today, is that if you really want to make an impact in this world, if you want to make a difference in this world, then you have to embrace who you are. You have to embrace your greatness, because it's not for the privileged. It's for every single person that wants it. They just have to embrace it.
Lolly, thanks for those words. I know that we are going to go after it hard, and we're going to embrace who we are. Thanks again for being on the Iron Sharpens Iron movement.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Talking to Lolly about how it matters in the moment and the importance of self-awareness was exactly what our tribe needed to hear today. Don't forget, our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Join our Facebook group to get even more behind-the-scenes action and exclusive content. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.